Hi everybody, welcome to week 8. We're talking about social organizations this week. Haven't seen y'all for a while on video, so hi, hope you guys are doing well. Um, so I really am enjoying your forum posts. I love reading them. I think you are all really thinking creatively and critically, and you're being kind to each other, and I love that. So thank you for those. And sometimes I wish I could comment on all of them. I just don't have the time, and so I hope you understand that. But I am reading them, and I enjoy it. Um, and you're just a really bright, thoughtful group of students, and that's really fun. So let's see. So this week I'm going to go over just a quick outline of our week this week, and then talk a little bit about working in social work and organizations and working in bureaucracy within a bureaucratic organization. And then I'm going to just give you some updates on the course in general. Um, so let's see. So we're in week 8, social organizations, and correlates with Brueggemann text chapter 10. And so this week's overview is we're going to discuss modern social organizations, governmental and non-governmental organizations, and social work within those types of organizations. And we're also going to talk about bureaucratic structure and how to survive in a bureaucracy, which we'll get into this lecture. The week's objectives this week, to be able to have a working understanding of modern complex social organizations and their implications for macro social work practice, be able to understand nonprofit social organizations so far as their purpose, their orientation, their structure, their social function, their process, and their funding methods. So we're just going to understand the broad concepts this week, and then next 2 weeks we're going to get into more of how to apply those kind of concepts and learn more about funding sources and those kind of things, but we're just going to get a general understanding this week. We're going to learn how to recognize the various kinds of social organizations that exist and what differentiates them. So there's 3 basic types. The book talks about traditional social service organizations, social advocacy organizations, intermediaries, and then social enterprise organizations, which are kind of a hybrid and kind of a newer model of social organizations. So that should be maybe new reading, new information for you. So just a heads up there. And then the last objective for this week is to be able to appreciate the challenges of working in a bureaucracy and kind of how to mitigate those challenges, which we'll talk about this week. So this week I'm going to do a little video lecture, and I'm going to go over the handout that's under this week's lecture. It's called Social Work with Organizations. There's 2 websites that also kind of correlate to this same topic of kind of surviving in a bureaucracy. One of them is called 2 Tips for Meeting Survival in an Entrenched Bureaucracy, and the other website is called Surviving in Bureaucracies 101, and they're just some interesting things I found on the net that correlate with our topic this week. The other handout that I put on there for our lecture is called Important Things to Consider in an Agency. The readings this week are chapter 10 in a Brueggemann text, and then there's a few Moodle readings listed there. One of them that I want to point out is it's called Resolving the Dilemma Between Organizing and Services, and it's basically about Acorn, the organization Acorn, if you've ever heard of them. They're kind of a social advocacy organization, but they also provide social services to people. And so it's kind of an article about trying to figure out how to resolve that dilemma between organizing for social change and doing kind of that social action piece, and then also providing services, real social services for people on the ground. So it's kind of a good article that talks about that dilemma. There's also a good optional reading in there. It's called Better Together, Expanding Rural Partnerships to Support Families, and that's about different kind of ways that we can get creative within rural contexts to be able to provide services for people, how we can kind of use extended care kinship networks and rural health nurses and those kind of different ways to kind of service rural communities in social organizations. There's a website there that's actually from Yale Career Services, and it's kind of a database of social services advocacy and non-governmental organizations. And it's just a really good little database of organizations that would be important if you're thinking about different kinds of social organizations within social work. One of my favorites is on there. It's called idealist.org. So you might want to check that out. So this week we're going to read over the lecture materials, this week's reading, which is the Brueggemann text and the Moodle readings, participate in this week's discussion forum, which I'm going to go over in a second. And this reminder also about section number 1 of your AAAA assignment. It's called Leader Changemaker Interview Project, is due next week. So that's next Sunday, October 27th. If you have any questions about that, please contact me. I did post some things about that assignment, so hopefully it's a little bit clearer for you. And then this week's resources is our Week 8 discussion forum, which is, I entitled it, Reconciling Social Work Values and Bureaucratic Systems. This week's discussion forum topic comes from our Brueggemann text, chapter 10, and it's under the questions for discussion on page 314. And I want you to answer question number 8. And I'm just going to read it to you because I think it's important to talk about for a second before we move on. So the question goes like this. Guided by its action social model, macro social work is a field that prizes altruism, compassion, authentic personal relationships, and two-way communication. Modern complex organizations, on the other hand, tend to eliminate altruism and compassion, require impersonal relationships, and use one-way communication. What dilemmas occur as social workers insert personal feelings and values into an impersonal organizational structure? How would you cope with these dilemmas? So I think this question actually gets to the heart of some really interesting matters when you're working in social services, and you all may be experiencing them now or have experienced them in the past. I chose this topic because I thought it was really pertinent. I remember this was a big challenge for me when I was coming out of graduate school, and I had these notions of social change and idealism in my heart and my head, and I wanted to go out there and change the world and make these inefficient, ineffective organizations efficient and effective and compassionate, and that doesn't always happen. So how do we reconcile those core values of us being a social worker and wanting those things and working within these kind of bureaucratic structures that are sometimes really limiting in the kind of change that you can make? You know, are you working for social control? Are you working for social change? And it's sometimes a really challenging value conflict for social workers, specifically when you first come out of graduate school. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And on that topic, that's kind of our theme for this week, I would say. I'm going to go over this handout that we have on Moodle called Social Work with Organizations. I call it just plain old bureaucracy. I hope you all can see this, and if not, this is also this handout is under our lecture materials in this week, so you can pull it up if you want to on your computer. So our role within interaction with and attempts to manipulate organizations define a lot of what we do as social workers. So we really have to have a solid understanding of organizations and their structure, what they do, their purpose, their function, to be able to be effective social workers. So a bureaucracy definition is a vertical hierarchy with power centered at the top. We have task-specific divisions of labor, clearly defined rules, and formalized channels of communication. Sound familiar? So when you're within those organizations, basically you don't really, you don't rock the boat, right? There's not a lot of change being made. It's kind of the structure of the organization in general just kind of resists change. It's depersonalized and emotionally detached system. It's generally designed to be efficient and effective. My question is it really? Or is it actually inefficient and ineffective in some ways because of the nature of the organization? So then, as social workers working within this bureaucracy, how do we give a personalized service to a client, which is our goal, right? Through a delivery system that's not set up in any way or shape or form to do that. That's our challenge, right? Um, there's some natural kind of emotional reactions that come up when you're dealing with bureaucracy. Can be anger, can be self-blame, sadness, depression, fright, and even paranoia. Um, and if this sounds really odd to you, you've probably never worked in a large bureaucratic organization. Um, so stick with me here, and hopefully you'll be able to understand this on some level, even if it's just cerebrally. So a couple of tips here about how to survive in a bureaucracy. Um, so one thing that always comes to mind when I'm working in kind of a challenging, usually a governmental organization, county organizations, that's what we're talking about, right? When we're talking about bureaucracy generally, is that you're never really going to win over the system, right? So you're not going to be able to prevail your ideas over the system. I'm not saying you can't fight certain little fights and win those, but you really need to declare kind of a truce with the bureaucracy and kind of agree to disagree, right? And be able to work in that kind of system and be functional. Know your contract and work expectations. So it's really important to know your job description really well and understand your contract if you're in a union, where your rights are, where your rights begin and end, and what are your work expectations, right? So how do you specifically, let's think about, how do you relate to coworkers? What are your expectations about when something goes wrong on the job? Do you go to your supervisor? Are you not allowed to jump chain of command? How does that work as far as the expectations at your workplace? Generally, bureaucratic organizations offer a lot of opportunity for trainings, professional training, so take advantage of those. I don't think I have ever gone to so many trainings than when I worked for the county. So, and a lot of them were really, really great trainings, so take advantage of that. Focus on what you can change, right? So you're not going to be able to change the structure of the organization overall, but there are little winnable kind of goals that you can change throughout your work there, just by asking questions and kind of pursuing different methods and modalities of things. And so there are winnable opportunities within a bureaucratic system. Just focus on what you can change, those small things that you can change. Try to control these emotional reactions that you have to a bureaucracy, especially when you're at work. Um, it's hard for me to say this because I want you to be able to be authentic with your emotional reaction, and it really depends a lot, to be honest, on your supervisor and if you have a supportive supervision in place. If you have a supportive supervisor that's really down to earth, really kind of personal and humanistic, then you can kind of let loose with your emotional reactions a little bit more than if your supervisor is a little bit more of part of the machine, so to speak. Develop a sense of humor. I can't say how important this is. Accept yourself and others and your mistakes, right? So be able to laugh about mistakes, your own mistakes and other people's mistakes, because if we get too caught up in people making mistakes, then it can be really frustrating. So how are we able to kind of laugh it off and move on? Leave work at work. Now this is a great tip for any of us as social workers, and it's easier said than done, isn't it? So specifically when working with a bureaucratic system, it can be really frustrating because you're so limited sometimes in how you can work with clients and what ways you can work with clients, and the changes that you can advocate for with clients is limited, right? You hit a ceiling where you're not allowed to go beyond that. At least that was my experience. So how can we leave those challenges at work and not take them home with us and keep have them keep us up at night? Again, it's easier said than done, but it's something to strive for. Socialize with your coworkers and supervisors from time to time. So have some kind of built-in fun, recreational kind of playtime activity with your coworkers to be able to get to know each other um, in a kind of outside of the workplace environment. That really helps a lot. And supervisors too. We used to have when I had a really great supervisor at the county, she would take us um, out to lunch once every few months, quarterly I think, and we would have a great time. We'd go to a Mexican buffet and we would just laugh and eat and have a good time. So it was a really nice way to kind of break it up. Don't seek reward from the bureaucratic system. Bureaucratic system, it's not going to give you a giant um, award or a rose or a thank you even. Um, Sometimes if you have, again, depending on your supervisor, you're not going to get any acknowledgement for the things that you do within the organization. So don't expect it from there. Try and get it from other places. What we did was we bonded really tightly, cohesively as a team. When I worked for County Mental Health, the Integrated Foster Care Program, we were kind of a pilot program. We were brand new. Everybody was really focusing on us. So we really had to be kind of collective and unified. And so I think there was about 6 or 7 of us case managers in the beginning there, and we just kind of really bonded tight as a work team, and we rewarded each other. So if we all knew generally each other's caseloads and clients' challenges from our team meetings, and if one of us had a breakthrough with a client or we had a good day or a good outing with a client, we would congratulate each other and celebrate in each other's successes. That was really nice. Maintain direct service contact no matter how high your position. So if you're able to move up within the bureaucratic system to become a supervisor or a program manager or program director, um, that's fabulous. And make sure that you continue to seek that direct service contact, the contact with your frontline workers, no matter what your position is. That's going to keep you kind of grounded into the main inner workings of the day-to-day of that organization, and so that you can be able to keep connected with the clients and their goals and their needs. And that's really true of any social work position. But it's sometimes can be especially challenging and kind of bucking the system when you're in a bureaucracy, because a lot of times some of those positions, when you get up higher, they do become pretty disconnected from the frontline work. So it's always a good thing to keep in mind, to keep in contact with what's going on the ground, so to speak. So this page just kind of talks about, this is actually came from a textbook that I used to teach from when I taught Introduction to Social Work, and I really like this little vignette here, and it talks about exactly what we're talking about: value conflicts between helping professionals and bureaucracies. So on the left there, that column, it talks about orientations of a helping professional. And then on the right, the column talks about orientations of a bureaucratic system. And it talks about kind of the juxtaposition of both of those kind of ways of being and how it could be really challenging. So for instance, the first one, the helping professional desires democratic system for decision making. And the bureaucratic system, most decisions are made autocratically. So most decisions are made very top down, right? So that's a challenge right away for decision making. And so if you feel like you don't have an input in what kind of decisions that are being made at the agency, it can feel pretty powerless. Let's see, how about another one? So a helping professional desires a flexible, changing system, and a bureaucratic system is pretty rigid and stable. So that might be really frustrating for us as social workers to be working in that kind of rigid system. And again, some people, social workers, do really well in bureaucratic systems, and they can kind of fly under the radar and feel like they can still make some changes and do some great work with clients and not feel affected, negatively affected by working in that bureaucratic system. I had a really hard time working in a bureaucratic system. I think I learned a lot, and I'm really glad for the experience. And I think every social worker should have that experience of working for the county or for a large bureaucratic system in social work, because it's great experience and how to kind of reconcile these. Um, but I think it's really challenging, and it's not for everybody. So I'll let you guys kind of look at those on your own. Um, so I want to kind of go over just some general information about the course and how things are going, and then wrap up for the evening. So just to let you know, I'm still working on grading week number 6 forum discussion. So be patient with me on that one. And then last week, week number 7, we had 2 forum discussions and the historical social movement research paper, which I'll be working on grading over the next few weeks, and be patient with me on that. That might take me a while because I really do want to give everybody sufficient feedback and really read your papers well. So I'm really excited to read those. Thank you so much for all your hard work on those. Heads up on our next Collaborate session, which is going to be next Monday, October 21st. And the subject is going to be called Developing Social Organizations. And we'll probably be doing some lecture and some group activities if I can figure out how to split you guys into groups a little bit more efficiently this time. We'll see how that works out. So again, if anybody has any questions as you go through the week, please let me know, email me. I'm happy to respond, and I hope everyone has a fabulous week. Take care.